And we will go. And hell, why not? We do the job well. Young and fresh. In the studio, we talk games. Arcade Weekly. I am one of your hosts, Wiggly. And back in the Trapdoor Mansion recording studio, David Bruce Saba.
Hey.
Did you hear that that's your new name?
Sure, I'll take it. Just here to talk games, right? Let's talk games.
We only talk games here. 100% game talk, 0% filler. We talk games. I'm not playing a zinger. What would you call it, David? A zinger? A loop? Well, it's not a loop because you don't talk over it. What would you call that?
An intro?
No, when I play the 0%. A stinger?
No, a stinger is when you hurt your neck.
The stinger drop.
Okay. Yeah, why not?
Do you know the pro wrestling?
I used to. I haven't.
used to know it.
Yeah, not since I was a little kid.
Okay, well, that's good because it sucks. No, it's made me a lot of good family over the years, and that's about it. And a lot of work. So today we are going to do. Can you still hear yourself, David?
I hear everything
Okay,
great.
great. I can't hear it. I don't know why I'm wearing my headphones. Ackham. Today I decided, hey, let's take another request from David. I guess he was spitballing, but I didn't know he was spitballing at the time, so we went with it, and we're doing P.O.W. Which
Prisoners of War.
Prisoners of War, which happens to stand for what it actually means.
Yeah.
Normally, you would think, okay, we want to make POW be an acronym for something, because that's an acronym. When something says something, but it's also an abbreviation for something, but it makes another word, that's called an acronym.
Indeed.
It's not called an abbreviation.
Right.
Like NASA. That's an abbreviation. You
Right.
can say it. It doesn't mean anything, though.
Right.
You might as well say, "Sloops,"
Yeah. No.
but that wouldn't work. You might as well say WCAG Flipglees, the We Talk Games Committee for Podcast Conformity and Listener Integration. You might as well say RITEEM, Rosenstein's Information Technology and Enriched Elbow Macaroni. Those are abbreviations, although sometimes I do use RIP team in a sentence like, I sure got RIT teamed up the ass. Something like that. Today we're going to talk about P.O.W. by SNK, one of my favorite companies. Why? Because they're behind the Neo Geo, one of the greatest systems of all time. In fact, my second favorite video game system, but video game of all time as well. I'm changing again. This one, though, is...
It's not a great game.
No.
No.
In fact, now, did you choose this because of nostalgia?
I did. Yeah. So it's complete nostalgia. When I was a kid, I was probably about, 8 years old when this came out.
Yeah.
My brother and I, we would go with my mom to the supermarket, to Shop Rite.
Okay.
And she would...
Shop Rite Superstore.
Shop Rite Superstore.
You wouldn't have the video games unless it was a superstore.
Right, yeah. And so right when you walked into Shop Rite, there was an arcade cabinet of P.O.W.
Uh-huh.
And my mom, back then, it was no big deal. You just leave your 8 and 7-year-old sons off at the arcade in the front of the store, and then you just go and shop for 45 minutes and come back and pick up your kids.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we sat there and we would pour quarters into P.O.W. and we were terrible.
You had to.
I mean, we were terrible, but
Well, you had to be. It's a terrible quarter muncher.
it is. It's
Awful.
not a great game. But I have fond memories of me and my brother, shout out to Paul, sitting there playing P.O.W. while our mom got groceries.
See, now my Shop Rite, which I would go to at midnight because the superstores were open all night and there would only be me, I would play Narc.
Yeah.
That to the end. And then I'd play Cyberball 2029. They had the 2-player version of 2049. Minor of 2049er? Anyway, Cyberball. It was the newer version, and it was a head-to-head. So the cabinet was like a wedge. It was like a triangle. It was a tetrahedron in shape and size and form and insides. It was sort of like a fourth-dimensional thing, but you looked at the screens, and you couldn't see the other player, so you could pick your own shots. Pick your shots, Flatfoot. And not have to worry about the other person seeing you. And Cyberball happens to be one of my favorite sports titles of all time.
Sports ball.
In fact, it's radioactive sports ball, and you only can defuse it by getting over the 50-yard line and, of course, trying to score a touchdown. And you use robots. So robots of all different types and shapes and track feats and things like that. That is not what happens in P.O.W., although I wish it was. Here's the weird thing about POW. Let's talk about POW, 1988. Let's get into a bit of making mechanics. I would say this fits in a Holiday Haymakers, but it really doesn't because you do an Army stuff too.
Yeah.
This is more a Summer of Stink, actually.
You've got an 8-way joystick. It's 2-player simultaneously. You've got 3 attack buttons, punch, kick, and jump.
It's a vertical, right?
It's horizontal. It's horizontal. Yeah, it's horizontal. And then there's some vertical components, but it's really mostly horizontal.
But I mean, the screen is horizontal.
It is.
Yeah, okay, so I'm thinking of another title that's actually a vertical game. There's a black cat again. See, he's in back by the pond. Okay.
So right off the bat, it's kind of funny. The prisoners, both of them, if you're playing 2-player, they've got a stick of dynamite inside the jail cell. And I want to know how'd they get it. I have no idea. The first thing that happens is you set off the stick of dynamite.
There's a lot of prisoner of war stuff.
Yeah, the door blows up and you escape, and it's a mad dash.
There's so many things that are not prisoner of war in here.
Yeah. Yeah,
but then again, I mean, what are you going to do? Be sitting there starving, getting water
poured
on your head?
No, you're in fantastic shape. One punch, one kick usually kills the enemy.
I guess the game would be chiller if it was actually what happens to a prisoner of war. Then you'd be playing chiller.
Right.
You walk around, you punch and kick people.
Yes.
Every now and then you can pick up a gun.
That's the cool part is once you do pick up that gun, you're bringing a gun to a knife fight because very few enemies carry machine guns. And when you have one, you just obliterate everything on the screen. What I didn't know when I was a kid and what I know now as an adult playing this game.
Yes.
Is you can save bullets and just use that gun as sort of like a club.
Yeah.
And you can hit people without, pistol whip people. And then you'll eventually pick up another machine gun and you'll replenish your bullets. So you can really carry that machine gun for large stretches.
Well, I had a hard time putting it down.
Yeah.
That was my problem. Once I picked up the machine gun, started wreaking havoc and still having to pump into quarters. This game cost me $175 to finish. I got to tell you that right now. So thanks a lot, buddy. But I know why you would play it on the NES, because on the NES, it's really easy.
It is. The NES,
Easier.
The NES version of POW is terrible. It's way worse than the arcade version. The arcade is not a great arcade game, especially for an SNK game, but the NES version is awful.
I'm trying to think of
Don't
why.
pick it up.
I'm trying to think of the differences. There were some differences that I noticed.
Graphically, there's just drastic. I mean, graphically, POW for the NES is among the worst looking games out there.
You know what? It's because you only have 2 buttons for the NES controller.
Yeah.
They worked the control in such a way that made the game a lot more pleasant to play, but still, as you mentioned, not a great game. And here's what the shocking thing is before we get into the real roots of the making mechanic. The shocking thing to me is that this POW came out in 1988. And are you ready for this? 2 years earlier, in 1986, that's when we got our first Ikari Warriors.
A vastly superior game.
So how the hell does SNK make Ikari Warriors? And maybe they were even out. I didn't check, but maybe Ikari Warriors 2 was already out, because it normally takes you 1 to 2 years of development to get a new game out. And I think they got up to like 5 on Ikari Warriors. At one point, you were half the size of the screen. It was that was silly. But how could you come out with Ikari Warriors for at least 1 or 2 iterations and then come out with POW? I don't know what they were trying to compete with. The only other thing in 1988 that I could think of was Bloody Wolf. Bloody Wolf by Data East. And I played the hell out of that for the TurboGrafx when that came out.
Yeah, that was a great game for Turbo. And then also the Double Dragon series was out at the same time.
Sure. So what year did Double Dragon come out?
I think it came out in 87 or 88. So just right at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that was Technos, right?
If you're used to Double Dragon and you think, hey, I'll play something like Double Dragon, let me pick up POW. Lower your expectations.
Yeah, that's not what you...
But feel free to play the arcade version of it, because it's not that bad.
Of what? What isn't bad?
I mean, it's, a generic Double Dragon. It's a generic Double Dragon. If you're in the mood to play that kind of a game,
yes,
it's not terrible.
Yeah, Technos of Japan, Double Dragon 1980, and Taito published it, but it was developed by Technos. And
87.
1987. So
Double Dragon was out already for a year And SNK thought that this was going to compete with Double Dragon, maybe?
I don't know. Double Dragon 2 actually came out at the same time that this came out, in 1988. So
maybe this really was a direct alternative to playing Double Dragon 2. In which case you made a horrible mistake.
You did. You should have saved your quarter and your bullets.
Yeah. I mean, it beats shopping at Shop Rite.
You think it does?
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, because I would pick up...
As an 8-year-old, I definitely would sit there and play P.O.W.
That's
over
right,
shopping.
21. Green Beret is what I started to go with here. Actually, it was called Russian Attack in the United States. And when I was a salesman, boy, did I play a lot of Russian Attack instead of going on cold calls. Russian Attack, let's see, Gladiator. Did you hear about the Happy Trojan?
No.
He was Gladiator. 1985 was Green Beret, so that came out a long time before, and that's just a side-scroller by
I just
Konami.
got that.
Yeah, side-scroller by Konami. If you know anything about me, got me NES. I got one. Rob came with it.
Oh, okay.
And that was the selling point, Rob.
Right.
Hell, I don't want those stupid baby-looking Mario games, so I got the two best games ever to come out. Trojan, which is an early Capcom game. I think Capcom made that, where you fall down the sewers a lot. It's very difficult to jump. Capcom had a lot of trouble jumping in their early years of game creations. And, of course, the one that everybody knows, one of the greatest games to ever come out for the NES, Predator. So this was my impression of the NES, was the arcade remake of Trojan and Predator and Rob the Robot stacking things. I like Rob the Robot. I still have him. He can look at the television. He's got his pencil sharpener.
Nice.
He's ready to go. Yeah. And I got the Power Glove. And a lot of people have the Power Glove, and they think, hey, look, I got the Power Glove. I'm wearing a Power Glove. No, you don't have a Power Glove unless you got that erector set that went around your television. Then you might have the Power Glove. And, of course, the glove ball game that went with it. Don't tell you have the Power Glove when you just got a piece of cosplay, pretend He-Man gauntlet. That's what you got. And you don't
I
have
think my
Rob
cousin
the Robot
had that.
if he's just there.
He had the Power Glove, and I remember playing it.
Yeah.
I definitely
Trying
don't
to
have
play
it, though.
You remember trying to play it.
I remember trying to play it. Yeah.
It had two IRs at the front.
What was the other one that was a really bad accessory? The Super Scope?
U-Force.
The Super Scope.
Oh, no. Oh, whoa. Stand back, friend.
You can't. Wait.
I love the Super Scope.
Hold up. You can't, because the gun really worked. The light gun worked.
Light gun worked.
The Super Scope was more difficult.
Oh no! It could get down to, I can't remember what I had. I was a Nintendo rep, so I can't remember if it could do 1 pixel, but it definitely could do 5 pixels, which is a really odd number, and so it must have been 1 pixel because I must have just made up that number. But Super Scope, you don't know how many Super Scopes I sold because of the Super Scope 5, because it was 5 games on the single cartridge. Maybe you had a bad TV. I think you were still using those round TVs. That's the problem with you.
Definitely
you
was.
were using one, like you used to watch the Jack Benny show when it was actually live.
Those things are like 250 pounds to pick up. They're not even that big. They're just
I had them
extremely heavy.
I would get all the old televisions that used to be in the living room in my room. It was fantastic to have the black and white TVs until I was, a teenager. And even then, I think I had black and white. I don't think I got a color TV until I was maybe working at the Kmart's. So maybe when I was 15. Anyway, and it was a console television. Anyway.
P.O.W.
Yeah.
There's really not a lot to talk about.
Well, there's a lot of repetitive enemies.
Very repetitive. You don't pick up any new skills, which is which really separates Double Dragon from P.O.W. if you're going to compare the two.
Both in the character portrayed and in your own gaming skill trying to play it.
Yeah.
You don't get good at this game.
No.
You just get more quarters out your pocket.
Yeah. The cutscenes are terrible, too. Really, really bad.
Was there some bad English in that? No, there was some bad English in Bloody Wolf, actually.
Yeah.
The possessive pronouns were incorrect.
Well, this one just graphically, the cutscenes are terrible.
Yeah. They didn't move.
No. The soldiers you're fighting are poorly equipped. Like I said, you've got a machine gun, and you're going to go through a lot of enemies before you get another one who has a machine gun. There's no bosses in this game. Just kind of beat the level. There's a final guy. You don't even really know he's the final boss. He's just some bald guy with a goatee and a handgun.
Yes.
And you dispatch of him fairly quickly, especially if you have a weapon.
But aren't there things blocking him before you get to him? No, I can't recall.
I can't
played
recall.
This 2 weeks
right,
ago.
right after you beat him, you have to crawl through the wall, and then you pop out the other side after you call for help. And you're calling Snake. I don't know if that's a direct connection to Metal Gear, but you call Snake to help you out, and then you crawl under that wall, and then you pop out. You beat some more enemies, and then a helicopter shows up out of nowhere, and you hop on. That's the end of the game.
And that's how Bloody Wolf ends as well. You get in a helicopter, and if you only played a single player, you're like, hey, where the hell were you, other guy? And he's like, sorry I wasn't there to help you. So I want to talk a little bit more about Bloody Wolf instead.
Yeah.
Because I played through it, both the arcade version and my TG16 version, and surprisingly, unbelievably, the items that you pick up, I don't know how this got through, because this is one of the things that ruined the Turbo in America. You asked me, why didn't the Turbo do so well in America? And I just gave you one dumb answer, which was sports games for the Genesis. But there were a lot more reasons, and one of the facts was it was so rad. When they advertised the Sega CD, that was like every advertisement for the TurboGrafx. It's so rad! Skateboards!
I can remember being very impressionable to those Bonk advertisements and really wanting to play Bonk and begging my parents to buy me a Turbo. But the price point was really the main detractor. It was so much more expensive than getting a Genesis or a Nintendo.
Yeah, initially it definitely was. And not only that, but when you got just the core basic system, it was just a mono system. It didn't even have AV outs. You had to buy a special thing that went on the ass end of it to give you AV out. Otherwise, you're just going through the coax. And if you bought the AV out, which was, I don't know, between $30 and $60, and then you ended up getting the CD player, well, then you just had something to throw at somebody's head, because it wasn't heavy enough to be a doorstop or a paperweight. So I guess you would just throw it at somebody's head, like the special edition, limited edition Batarang that you got when you pre-ordered Gotham City Under Crush Rock, that new Batman, where it was a plastic Batarang that was glued onto a block of wood, like that fish that sang. Bloody Wolf, very funny, because when you shot the person, they would look up to heaven as in, why? With their one hand going up and their other hand clutching their heart, which a blood stain was coming through. Kept in the game. There's a person that you fight that jumps in and out of the ocean that has a flamethrower. He's one of the bosses at the end. Each boss has an end at his boss. Each level has an ending boss in Bloody Wolf. Same year. And most of it's side-scrolling. There are some there are some parts where you go up into the screen. There's parts where you go underwater, like you actually press the jump button instead of jumping up. You go under the water and you see the shadow of your head.
Kind of like Bayou Billy.
We were going to talk about Bayou Billy, but it did not have an arcade equivalent.
Yeah, right.
So we'll have to do it as a what you've been playing lately, maybe.
Bayou Billy is a really hard game. I love that game, but you need to spend a lot of time to master it.
I wanted to do Tubin. I thought Bayou Billy was in the arcade, but I was thinking of Granny and the Gators, which is actually a combo system of a mini pinball and an arcade game. And I can't remember if it had a light gun or not.
Bayou Billy had light gun levels, it had driving levels, and it had like Double Dragon levels.
Okay.
It had everything.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll talk about Bayou Billy, and I'll talk about Granny and the Gators if I could go find one to play. I wish somebody made a Granny and the Gators for my virtual pinball table I built. They do make the Baby Pac-Man, which plays really, really well, and I really love to play it on the virtual pin. There were a couple interesting things. There was one level where they say, hey, you're going to float down the river on this raft. You know, it's going to be better if you don't use your gun. Hey, you should just use your knife. Now, there's people shooting at you from the sides of the river, but then most people are trying to jump on the raft with you, and then you stab them. But at the end of that level, you get to the guy, and because you don't have your gun anymore, you only have your knife, you get to fight a giant, steroid-infused jumping humper. One of the jumping humpers from Castlevania, you get to fight a jumping humper. It's one of these moments of the Indiana Jones. In a later level, you go against the jumping humper, but now you have your gun. And when the jumping humper goes to try to jump around like a nut, you shoot him once with your gun and he's dead. Whereas with the knife, he gets, he can take it. You can take a couple stabs. And by the way, in Bloody Wolf, you try to rescue the hostages. Some of them give you keys. And there's actually pieces of equipment that you pick up that are supposed to help you in some manner. I haven't figured out the manner, but they definitely fill some blocks up above your head. And one is a rosary beads. You get the rosary bleeds. And for some reason, they kept that in the turbo version. They chop out the part in Splatterhouse where, well, first of all, they took out where you're wearing a white mask. I understand that because they didn't want to get sued.
Right.
But it's just a freaking hockey mask and a jumpsuit. So they made it a red mask. But there's this one part that they changed in Splatterhouse for the TurboGrafx, which is another reason I think that these things failed. It's where you go into this church and you're just sort of standing there and all this scary music is playing and you hear these noises and everything else and you can't do anything except stand there for like what seems like 5 minutes watching nothing happen. And then it's because in the real version, there's a crucifix up on the church front area there in front of the pews. And I can't remember if it just flies around a little bit or if it turns upside down or whatever it does. I can't recall. But they took the crucifix off the wall. You're in a church. What do you think you're going to find in there?
That's a very Nintendo thing to do. I didn't know that Turbo did that sort of thing.
They did it all the time.
Yeah.
But they didn't do it where this guy jumps out of the ocean, the river or whatever, and he does the flamethrower. When you finally kill him, he falls back in, and then there's this pool of blood that comes up in the river. And you do get the crucifix item from one of the people when you get a key, and who knows what you do there. In Bloody Wolf, you also climb over fences, and you do a lot of neat things, and one of the easiest bosses is actually the helicopter. Now, there's helicopters in P.O.W., but you don't do anything with them.
Yeah, you can't interact with them the way that you can in some of these other games like Bloody Wolf and Double Dragon.
Duck Hunt.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say Duck Hunt.
No. Enemies just pop out of them. Same thing. You'll have like trucks come up or tanks, and the enemies just jump out, but you can't really interact with the actual machinery. You know, another game that I absolutely love, and I've talked about before on this podcast, is Guerrilla War.
Yeah.
And I love hopping in and out of tanks in Guerrilla War. And,
sure.
And just blowing shit up. But unfortunately, you can't do that in P.O.W. because it's a really basic game.
It is way too basic. What the hell was I talking about with Kyle last week? We talked about, for the Game Boy, we talked about, shit, I didn't update the Fortified Zone, and boy, was that a simple game. Oh, and you know what that reminds me of? Speaking about simple games, I was mentioning how Booby Kids, when we talked about Booby Kids, how it came out as Crater Maze for the TurboGrafx and the PC Engine. And I was wondering why it stunk so much because, like I said, there were a lot more parts in the arcade version of Booby Kids than there were in the home version. And indeed, there were. On the home version of Crater Maze, you only fight a green blobby alien and the red McDonald's hamburger, if you remember those hopping around type of things, that alien, except he's all red. And those are the only enemies you fight. And you go to different stages. You go to the Shogun stage, you go to the mechanical stage. You don't even fight the robots. You just fight these two enemies, and that's it.
They just travel with you.
Those are the only enemies through the whole game. One of the things that you can do is you can pick up enough shovels that you could do the entire screen of shovels, and of course it's set up horizontally instead of vertically. But you see all the characters that you're supposed to be fighting, like the gangsters and the dinosaurs and the police officer. Except I think they put like a piece of mail in the police officer's hand, like he's supposed to be a mailman. Like that's better. Now you only get to see them as they crisscross the screen to draw on your vertical line wipe to the game field. So you only see them after each stage completes, and then they draw the new screen on by walking past each other, but they're never in the game itself. And I found out why. It wasn't just an American thing, which I thought it was. And I mentioned Doryman instead of Blue Blink when I was talking to Kyle. I should have mentioned Blue Blink, Blue Blink was an anime that was very much like Super Mario Brothers 2 in America.
Doryman, the blue guy?
Doryman's the little blue walrusy thing that can do something magical that I can't think of right now. I have no idea. But that's what happened. When they brought Booby Kids home, they made it Doryman. I call him Doryman. I think maybe it's Doraemon. No, it's Doraemon, yeah. And I have a lot of Doraemon stuff. I just don't know why I don't look at his name. It's because he doesn't have that Metal Alert bracelet. But but that's what happened. So they made it a baby game, for the home. And then it's the same like cutscenes. He's flying around in this space sled with his friends going through time.
Right.
But he only fights those two things. So when they brought it to America, they put the Crater Maze guy back in. Crater Maze guy's friends in the cutscenes, but just made it Doraemon as far as gameplay goes and didn't do any of the fun stuff that you do in Booby Kids. And guess what they replaced the flamethrower with? A bubble gun.
Of course.
You shoot a bubble at the enemy and he gets encased in a bubble and he starts floating away. But you still bury him and his cross still comes up after you bury him. So,
it's just cartoon murder, though.
You tell me. Devil's Crush, Devil's Crash. Greatest video pinball games ever of all time for TurboGrafx. Devil's Crush. They call it in America Devil's Crash. They call it in Japan for PC Engine, I think. They took out the pentagrams that went around as just stars going around in the dump holes. They replaced that with a triangular looking thing that also spins. Actually, it's like the Star of David, really. So they made everything stupider that they didn't need to change. How cool would that have been if you had this satanic thing at home? Because you're fighting the devil. What are you supposed to fight the devil with? The Star of David happening? No, it's supposed to be some evil stuff on there. You're fighting ghosts and paranormal things in Splatterhouse. You're splooshing enemies against the wall. And here it's supposed to be all flowers and daffodils.
That is a hard game to pick up for the NES. It only came out for the Famicom, and also there's a PAL version. So I don't know which countries it came out in Europe, but it did come out in Europe. And
Splatterhouse?
No, Devil's Crush.
Oh, Devil's Crush. Okay,
yep.
Okay.
And it's pricey to get a hold of.
Okay.
Yeah.
It came out for the Genesis as well. Not as good. It's like a wonky type of distorted squish screen, but it did have a few different types of bonus levels. Nonetheless, the biggest mistake I think was when they released Bonk 2. Bonk 2, when he eats the first piece of meat, he turns into a skipping around, jovial, cross-dressing type of PC caveman. And he blows kisses. Now, listen, I played Stonewall. Trapdoor was the first band to reopen Stonewall in Allentown back to bands up. They were only track acts until that was shut down and Trapdoor opened it back up. And there's not one person that went to Stonewall, not one homosexual friend that I had over my entire life. And remember, if you listen a long time, Trapdoor was called Trapdoor, the all-gay band. But anyway, that's besides the point. There's no homosexual person I knew that wouldn't have run out to buy that system if they would have saw Bonk in his secondary transformation stage. Then when he eats a third piece of meat, he turns into Frankenstein's monster, and then he turns into this big, giant, double boob-headed creature when he's in his last stage, and he blows fire. So leaving that out was a huge, huge mistake. When they brought JJ and Jeff over, that was called Kato and Ken in Japan, based on a very funny comedy show, Kato and Ken. And in Kato and Ken game, they would bend down and they would fart on their enemies.
Right.
This puff of tan smoke would come out of their butts, and they'd fart on their enemies. And that's how you fought your enemies. And there was cross-dressing parts thing in there and everything as well. Well, when it came out as JJ and Jeff in here, they left in the Poopatros, which is this bird that dumps a swirly poop on your head before emojis came out. I mean, that was controversial to me. I'd rather fart on somebody than get a swirly poop on the head. But they made them bend over, and they had a spray paint can. And out of the front of the spray paint can, instead of their butt, they squatted over and they sprayed you with a spray paint can with the same tan fart. So let me ask you this. If you saw on a shelf a video game system where you farted on your enemies, you're telling me you wouldn't buy that?
Look, Nintendo was even worse. They removed crosses out of The Legend of Zelda.
Oh, right, sure.
They when
and Castlevania, of course.
And Castlevania, of course. And then when what was that fighting game? not Street Fighter, the direct competitor for Street Fighter at the time. Mortal Kombat.
Oh, Mortal Kombat. Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah.
Mortal Kombat,
Your spit.
the Super Nintendo completely stripped that game of any blood.
Yeah.
The only system that really embraced that stuff was the Genesis.
Yeah, but you had to put in the code. You had
That's
to put
right.
in the blood code.
Yeah.
It's so sad that those games came out then instead of now. And, even back then, there were legit studies about how violent video games had the reverse effect on, like, gang members and things like this. But it was the whole, who was the vice president for Blowjob Betty? Who was, Gore.
Yeah.
So what was his wife's name? Tipper Gore. Tipper Gore was she's a big advocate for musical lyrics, killing our kids and everything else. And, Frank Zappa, and who else was a big champion of that? John Denver. John Denver was a big advocate for the self-regulation of no words and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, hey, that's P.O.W. Don't play it. Oh, I forgot to mention Two Crude Dudes, also known as Crude Busters, 1991. So that's after 1988, but that's another game that I would rather play over POW, and that game stinks too. First one was Stink 1, this one Stink 2.
So if you had to rank them, games that came out 1988, Double Dragon 2, number 1.
Yeah.
Bloody Wolf, number 2?
In 1988, yeah.
And then a distant 3 POW. I've never played Two Crude Dudes. I can't have a comment on that.
So it starts out so crude.
Okay.
And so dude.
Okay.
But then it quickly devolves into neither.
Okay.
It quickly devolves into, I just fell off this moving thing, and now I got to put in more quarters like I do in POW.
There was a game that involved dinosaurs and Cadillacs.
Sure.
Back then.
It's called Dinosaurs and Cadillacs by Capcom. Yes.
Really inventive.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic game. That's right in the line of Alien versus Predator and things like that. And by the way, that's another thing I wanted to mention. Let's not talk about POW as we haven't this whole episode, but I was just listening to an old version of We Talk Games, and you can find out everything so easily. Watch this. Let me show you something, David. You could either just type this right in, WeTalkGames.com, our name is our address, or you can type in WeTalkGames.com/InTheCan, or you could just go right on the front page and click on In the Can. And right here is a live search of every single arcade game that we've ever reviewed. And if you want to go to Cadillacs, we did review Cadillacs
and Dinosaurs.
1993 by Capcom. You could just start typing one letter. But what I wanted to talk about was Alien versus Predator, because that's the episode I listened to. It was Johnny Capcom and Kyle Von Kubik talking about Alien versus Predator. And they were both crapping on who would want to be the human. And I got to tell you, that's all I be. The only person I always am is, I can't remember what her name is, but she's the person I play all the time. So, yeah, you might want to be one of the two Predators against aliens, but I got to tell you, the two Predators kind of stink, and they can't pick up all the different guns that the people drop and things like that. So, if we could redo that episode, we won't, because it's far too common of a game. Did we ever review Punisher? No. Okay, good. Did we ever review P.O.W.? Let's see. No, good.
How about Guerrilla War?
I don't think so. No.
I got to come back. I got to come back so we can talk about Guerrilla War.
Definitely. Yeah, let's do that.
Very near and dear to my heart.
We never talked about Akari Wars. We never talked about Bloody Wolf. Blood Brothers, we talked about by a TAD Corporation. TAD! Okay, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening. Go check out some of the other episodes we do where we actually talk about the game that we say we're going to talk about. But there was actually nothing to talk about here. You walk around, you punch, it stinks.
Get a machine gun, you can hold on to it.
Controversy creates cash, and you can't let go.
Yeah.
But we did talk about a lot of other good arcade games.
It beats Shop Rite.
Find a Shop Rite that still has an arcade. You can't. Peace, love, and understanding. I hope that you like us. Bye-bye.